All right, we're back for, well, not back. It's a completely episode. I was about to say back for Road to Pro Raw. Not back for Road to Pro Raw. It's a one-off episode for covering my prep into the Deadlift only comp that I just did on the weekend. And me and Matt, the coach, we're going to go through and talk through a little bit of the prep. I'll get questions constantly about what I'm doing. And even when I post up kind of this is the general layout I'm doing, people still struggle a little bit to picture what that is. I've had a lot of questions this prep because it's been a little bit different in the past. People are like, oh, why are you training legs every day? You know what I mean? Like, you must be fucked. And not if you do it the way we did it. So like, yeah, going to go a little bit into that because it was a bit different. Anybody who knows the results of the comp, I didn't get over, not getting 400, which makes this video a touch less cool. but I feel like we made some really solid progress over the prep regardless. And I feel like it was just little silly things, maybe mental on the day that let me down. And I have absolutely no hesitations in saying that it'll be there either the next time I compete or in the very near future anyway. Yeah, and I think we learned a lot from this prep and there's a lot to carry forward. So
Absolutely,
before we get into that, I started working with Matt. Well, this sheet will tell us in early, August. So it was about a 16-week prep, I think. Yep. I remember.
Just about.
Yeah, and before this, I was coming into it out of a pretty much coronavirus lockdown, just having done bro bodybuilding stuff, slamming myself on hack squats and home dumbbell presses and stuff like that up into it. So there was a little less probably skill. It took me a while to get back my squats. I had a couple of the niggles from my hip shifts and stuff like that. And yeah, it was in a bit of a place where skill was a little bit more of a priority at the start, I would say. And obviously with that hypertrophy, a little less of a focus. Hence why potentially you decided to go with a layout like this.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's just talk through this first week. But we obviously won't do every week, but if we just talk through this first week and the general layout and the gist and the thought process behind it, and maybe give people an insight into that, and then we'll just skip through and obviously, like I said, not every week, but just look at the progressions in specificity as we go through it.
For sure. So what I'm looking at with this is I'm looking at trying to get Will to have as much frequency as possible in each one of these movements. Because the better, especially with him coming off of such a long layoff with a bodybuilding style phase of training, skill is the first thing that we have to start getting back. But because he's so desensitized to the stimulus of competition specific movements, we do have a lot of ability to drive more frequency in these movements to give him a little bit better output during the training. So what we have to do when it comes to picking exercise selections or picking exercises that are going to give him the best opportunity to relearn the skill that we need to learn and get where we need to go, we need to start doing things that are going to be very, very similar to comp movements, but limited enough in the load that he's not just going to totally come back in and kill himself on week one, which is one of the reasons why on day one, his primary deadlift and light bench, we're starting off with deficit deadlifts at a 7 for a top set of 5s, right? So we're looking at doing this off of a very, very low deficit. So maybe like a 1 inch or a couple centimeter deficit so that he's getting relatively close to a normal position. And he's using a deadlift bar here. So we can still work on pulling slack out of the bar and getting more specific with that. But we've got just enough of a positional change in his start position that we're able to limit the load a little bit more. And I think we got it to, what'd you get up to this for a set of 5? Like 320, I think, towards the end?
Something like that.
Yeah, you got 340 for 4. Like that was a big deficit deadlift. Like it was RP 9.95, but we got up to 340 for a set of 4. And this is what we're looking at doing is like, I want to make sure that we're doing enough that we can get him to still lift some load and still work fairly hard, but limit it enough so that he's not going to die during in the process, which is another reason why we have a very low volume close grip bench on that same day. And then we have some accessory exercises like machine leg curls and front foot elevated split squat isos to just work on building up a little bit more, like just work on, that one was for more of the hip shift, which is why the load was just at fucked. The second day I'm having him bench again, but again, they're having a bit of a load limiter here where he gets a single because we can drive some singles here in a deadlift comp. We can do a little bit more with that. So we don't necessarily need to drive singles, but I think it's going to be one of those things that in the phase of everything getting a little heavier, we can just expose the body to a little bit more systemic stress and keep driving a little bit more intensity on a comp bench or on a 2-count pause bench single. That'll hopefully be able to get him a little bit more adapted to the just feeling of lifting or lifting heavier load and putting max effort into something again. I don't necessarily want it to be a deadlift at all times because that would obviously be the most specific thing that we could do. But anything that we're doing where he's going to have the ability to like produce maximal force into a load, whether it's a squat, a bench, or a deadlift, is going to be an easy thing that we can do to kind of start reconditioning his nervous system to allow him to feel what it's like to express heavy work again or hard work again. So the reason why we picked bench for this one, and the reason I selected a 2-count pause bench, is because bench is one that recovers very quickly. It's one that's not really going to beat him up too much. And it's one that we can drive a lot of effort on with a fair amount of frequency if we cut the volume down to the right spot. So if you look at the volume that we're doing on this, he's doing one single at a 6 and then a 3x8 at 61%. So it's super light, it's super low volume, and it's not very, very challenging. Then we moved on to a shortened position incline dumbbell press where we're training the shortened position of the sternal head of the pec to try and work on just building up a little bit more integrity in the shoulder and actually teaching him how to press with his pec a little bit more. But in that day, we're doing a total of 6 sets of chest, right? So we've got 2 from day 1. We've got another 6 from day 2. So we're at a total of 8 sets of bench so far, and that's it. So he does no more bench other than that. And everything else is going to be lighter and accessory. It's the same thing with the squats and the deadlifts that we're looking at doing. We're trying to figure out how to break up volume as much as we can to hit the optimal level of sets for him over the course of a week where we can maximize intensity in each one, which is why in his day 3, we have sleeved squats, which end up working out and end up being pretty easy for him. And then some very, very light RDL. So we can get a second deadlift stimulus and still get him to work through that same range of motion in a different load constrained manner. It didn't work so well on day 1. We ended up switching out and doing something slightly different on it for the remainder of the week.
Plan. Yeah, it changed pretty quick.
Yeah, it changed pretty quick. And that's one of the things that I try to do is I try to make sure that, especially with a guy like Will, I update my programs weekly for him because things are going to change very, very, very fast for him. But here we also got things like RDLs in that when we started getting them, that was another great stimulus for him. He was hitting pretty heavy weight towards the end of the phase on the RDL. I think we got up to like 200 kilos and it was cruising. And then on the
low back ended up getting cooked, which is from RDLs. I think we changed it to just a hamstring stimulant, like a leg curl or something.
Yeah, we just changed it to a regular bridge.
Yeah, just because it was, after squatting and all that, the squatting tends to beat up my lower back more than anything because I get that little bit of a hip shift going, and then a lot of the times it's okay, but if I just hit 1 or 2 bad reps, it's just like absolutely pumped, and then RDLs are I do a little bit difficult. I'm on the ground between sets, just rolling around trying to get blood flow. So the output was obviously, when that happened, it was heavily limited. So and we just started swapping it.
Yeah, and again, like that's not necessarily one that I even cared about there. What we're looking at doing is just getting a little bit more hamstring stimulus. So it's like the session that mattered in that week was the deficit deadlift day.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. So it's like, this is an accessory movement that was like, it's okay. It's important, but it's not going to be as important as the main work on the main day. And then on his day 4, we just got a little bro pump in where he did some leg pressing, some machine leg curls, some machine chest press, just kind of deload the tissue and train different qualities that we weren't working on training before. Because he's just kind of transitioning out of a bodybuilding phase, we have to keep a little bit of it in so we can start transitioning him out of that same bodybuilding phase. Right. So it's one of the ways that I build out and I do programs for people is I kind of try to keep some aspects of their prior phase in the new one so we can start working on transitioning them into a newer stimulus.
Yeah, it's me and Jamie talked about these in our Road to Pro videos a little bit as well. The fact that a lot of coaches miss it's almost like you have to, like when bodybuilders talk about like a reverse diet, it's like we have to periodize in and out. You can't, for some reason people understand the point of like lowering volume and lowering fatigue going into a prep. and tapering into a prep or whatever you want to call it, but then they don't understand the idea of that it's a gradual build back up as well. For some reason, I don't know. It seems to be like, all right, cool, we hit fuck all squats this week at 4, 3, 2 weeks out, and then the week after comp it's 5 sets of 10, man.
Yep, exactly.
and then week 1 they're okay, week 2 they're okay, week 3 they're fucking missing a rep, week 4 they're missing a set, week 5 they've got bad hips, and then week 6 they don't understand why, and they're back doing 3 sets like they did in the prep.
Exactly.
Minimal work again. So it's like
we all come back to the middle eventually.
Yeah. Whether it's I always say to people, I'm like, when I see a person that maybe doesn't listen to me and they're pushing the intensity, or their RPs are well overshot, or they're hitting a lot more work than I give them, sneaking in work, I'm like, man, either we can plan deloads, or we can plan fatigue management, or we can let your body deload you when you fucking snap in half, or your legs get, your hips get tight, or your back is angry, whatever like that. So it's up to you, because we're going to deload anyway. It's just whether you want your body to force us, or we can plan it,
Yeah, exactly.
But
I think that's one of the cool things that we did here is this whole prep we only deloaded really once.
I think one of
that was more of a pivot week than anything else.
From a coaching point of view, though, the biggest thing I got out of prep was it was a lot lower average intensity, as in like 7s, 5s. I know this is an intro week, but if as we go through, you'll see it's kind of like only hitting 8s semi-regularly, and driving a lot more workload through frequency and throughout the week, breaking it up, keeping that low so that the overall stimulus can be higher. Whereas before, I guess it's easy to get lost up in the day, as in like, okay, I'm going to plan this day. And then when you're happy with that day, you're like, okay, I'm going to plan this day, instead of looking maybe overall in terms of this week or into next week and into the following week and stuff like that. Like, it's a concept people understand and they talk about it all the time, but I find a lot of people, even though they know they should be doing that, they just don't do that. So that was one of the biggest things for me. And the biggest difference is the past press was keeping the intensity a bit lower, like 6, 7 for the most part, across it. And the other big thing I would say at this point that was a little bit different was, like I said, the frequency of deadlifting and squatting. And to most people, they'd be like, oh, well, you'd be fucked on this day because of the deadlifts here, and you'd be fucked on this day because of these ones, and you know what I mean. And but it wasn't the case, because we did not in this week to start, but future on, like this heels elevated safety bar squat on the searcher squats and what turned into front squats and things like that. Obviously wasn't beating up my lower back very much, because it was a much more upright quad dominant, if you want to call it that, squat that didn't hit the deadlifting muscles too much. And so when it came to the deadlift day, even though I was kind of generally fatigued, like I wasn't fatigued that it was like, how I would usually be if I did squats then deadlifts, then you know what I mean. Like, I don't know. To me, if I said that, if I say this layout, well, maybe not this layout, but some of the future bits where it's like squat, pause, deadlift.
You went too far out.
Oh, did I get too far?
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. Yes. Squats, deadlifts, whatever. Went too far back.
Yep.
Doesn't matter. Most people would look at that layout and be like, fuck, I would die doing that workout. How can you do squats and deadlifts back to back? But like you said, it's more like, hey, look, a front squat is very different to a back squat in terms of how hingy or squatty or what muscles is being used, the bias towards. And same with the deadlifts, we can use different deadlift variations. And as you allude to on the deficits, using variations to pull back load, to limit the amount of load. I had this conversation with Colm, one of my New Zealand's strongest man competitors, who has a very strong, like he'll be squatting near 400, he deadlifts over 400 already. And I had this conversation with him when I did his program, saying like, we're purposely choosing exercises which you just can't do a lot, because he was like, fuck, like I want to go heavy. And I'm like, yeah, but we can go hard in terms of effort, but not hard in terms of load because you're just too goddamn strong, man. Like we can't be pulling 400 every week or 350 every week. Like you're just gonna fucking die.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly why I kept with you. I kept the intensity a lot lower for a lot longer period of time because we just need to be very cognizant of your recovery. Where if we're sitting there and we're having you consistently train, and I think that was one of the things that we did fairly differently during the actual prep was when we started getting to heavier singles and heavy work on your deadlift, we waived them. And we did a high week, low week, high week, low week, high week, low week leading into the competition to give you the ability to like actually recover from each one.
Yeah.
Like a guy like Will, or like a guy like you're talking about with your guy, like that 350, 400 kilo deadlift is going to take a long time to recover.
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah. I'm certainly tired for 1-2 days after deadlifting. So even if it is only an 8 or a 7 or even a 6.
Yeah.
So this is the first week of prep here. So the first time it changed in terms of structure overall, because obviously now the hard day is the 4th day, which is the day of competition, the Saturday. So this day was done on Saturday morning every week, which the competition was a Saturday morning. So it winded up in terms of that. And made kind of that day the priority, that day the progress tracking day, whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
And so this is where I was talking about is this front squat. The bench is still happening, pause deadlifts. Then we got the pause squat, then the deadlift. So the biggest things from my perspective as an athlete was, and I remember telling this to you, like this day and then coming into this day was tough because this day was absolutely not limiting me enough, but it was definitely like impacting how much output I could have on this session.
Yeah.
However, that was kind of the goal, because otherwise I could have done, 320 to 350 somewhere in there for this, and that probably wouldn't have been that great at 10 weeks out or whatever, 11 weeks out.
Right. And that's the biggest thing that I was looking at with this is if we're that far out, what I want to do is I want to do whatever I can to limit load in any other capacity by building up fatigue as much as we possibly can. So the reason why I put that really, really hard squat workout the day before was intentionally to limit how much work you could actually do on your main deadlift day.
Yeah.
Right. And that was one of those things that the week that we started getting into like the peak and we switched that and moved that session away, we got a huge rebound effect on the deadlift.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that might be something for the next prep. That might be something that we keep in a little bit longer, where we keep a higher fatigue session in the session before your comp specific one, just so we can give you a little bit more fatigue in that one. And then when we go into the last-ish phase of peak and we cut that out entirely, then you can really super compensate and like rebound like a motherfucker into it.
Yeah. It tended to be, I was still able to progress under fatigue, I guess. So it was still like not long as screwing me up too hard. So I think we found the right level there. And people noticing as well this percentage work here. So it's for the most part just linear periodization. Like people tend to think that, I don't know, linear is an inferior model these days. I don't know, but you'll understand if you're looking at this, there's clearly a mixture of DUP concepts, linear periodization concepts, wave concepts, whatever the fuck periodization model you want to imagine concepts. So it's, I just wanted to quickly point that out because I get a lot of people like, hey, do you wave loading or do you do this? And I'm like, I do.
You're like, yes.
Things that work. Yeah, this was the last day of that layout where we were having the squat before deadlift. So this one, my E1RM there, estimated 1RM was looking for like 400 there, which was fucking awesome.
It was also the week that you stopped filling out the sheets. So if you're a client of Will's watching this, don't fill out your sheets anymore because he doesn't fill out them for me.
We're chatting. I expect you to remember everything I tell you, okay?
Right.
Yeah, so after this, you'll see that things were flipped about. So front squat is day 3 rather than day 1, and the pause squat is day 1 rather than day 3. So now fatiguing this day, piss easy. kind of like I don't know, like an easy day before heading into deadlift. So I was fresh this day, and
Right.
you'll notice that the loads will project that to some degree.
Yeah, and that was the biggest thing that we tried to do with this one is when we switched into more of the intensification phase. What we had to do is we had to start working on actually intensifying or building up the intensity of the actual training, right? So that what we had to do with that is move fatigue inducing sessions away from the more important stuff so that you could focus on starting to express a little bit greater output on the day that mattered. And again, it was like what I was saying is what I was kind of saying earlier is like we had a pretty significant jump in intensity as soon as we did that, because we got from the first week of doubles when we started going, or the first week when we started going into like heavier doubles after getting rid of that, like you had a fairly large jump. Like we went from 355 for a double at 7 to 370 for a single at 8. And it was like a fairly large jump.
Yeah. And then as you were talking about earlier, there was a little bit of the wave load there. So I looked at the 6.5, 8.5, 6, 9, which actually didn't end up happening because I got a bit of a bug before the week before comp, which is not ideal for anybody. And then the comp week itself.
Yeah. And the one that was the most exciting was the week that it was on November 20th, the day 4 primary deadlift day on November 20th, where you pulled 380 at an 8.5. And like that put us at a projected 1 rep max of 405. And I was very, very confident going into this that we were going to crush 400.
Yeah, I think like I said, I really do think there was a big mental aspect to the 400 that led to me maybe not being able to get it or grind through it like I usually would. And also just like the lack of competition and just general arousal because it was a small comp and things like that too. But just getting sick for the 3 days leading up to this comp, to this 390, what should have been 390 a week out from comp was not ideal, because I think if I pulled that 390 even relatively comfortably, even if it was like a 9.5, even if it was like just not a complete 11 grind, because 387 at the Pro Raw, what was it, over a year ago now, was an absolute grind and a half. So yeah, I think if I pulled 390 there and was semi-confident, it would have led to 400 being a little bit more just, I would have been telling myself a lot more confidently that was there.
Right. That was one of the reasons why I wanted to give you an at 9 single that close to the meet, is so we could just ride a wave of momentum going into the meet.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people probably are used to seeing more like heaviest deadlifts done here or the week before, like 3-4 weeks out, depending. But I was saying to people, like, it's a deadlift only comp. There's not a huge amount of fatigue from squats. There's not a huge amount of fatigue from bench. It could have been different circumstances if that was the case. Who knows?
Right, and that's the biggest thing is like every other session that we had was for all squats and lower body was at like 7, 7.5, 6, or 6.5. So it was super easy. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So it would have been. Yeah, it would have potentially been different if it was a squat or bench. We'll see how this next break goes, I guess.
Yeah.
And then the rest is pretty simple. Taper. Since we already had the Saturday deadlift session here, like this was the deadlift session the week before and the week before that for many weeks. It was literally a matter of, this is another deadlift session. This is comp day. And so it was just a matter of tapering back those days prior a little bit and riding that same structure into the meet itself.
Yep. Then one of the things that we're doing a little differently, I think, than you may have done before is kind of like I talked about with the previous phase of your bodybuilding training coming into the new one. We're trying to keep a little bit more of the specific program set the same way at a very, very low intensity. So in the reload week after the comp, we hit the exact same schedule that he had before with less intensity and less work.
Very, very much just going through the movements week.
Right. Exactly. And then when we start moving back into like getting ready to prep for the next meet, that's when we start getting a little bit more specific with them all again.
Fun stuff. I'm keen.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
And then that puts us into the next comp prep, which will be, what did I say, April 10th or something like 11th, which is Queensland state titles here for me. That'll be a 3 lift, that'll be at 110, but it's a 24-hour weigh-in, so it's not really at 110. I'll have to do more videos on that and explain that to people as we go. But probably for that prep, if you're keen, I haven't even mentioned this,
Yep,
but
absolutely.
I'm throwing you in it. Like this was obviously deadlift only and a little bit, so this one video is plenty for people, but in that one we might do like the pro one and have more frequent updates and
yeah, absolutely, I'm down.
Yeah, I'll get heaps of questions on this stuff, so it'll be good. But yeah, if anybody has any questions on that, if anybody has any any more detail they want to go into or ask about a particular exercise, anything, hit me up, and if I don't know, I'll hit Matt up and, and we'll answer it in some way.
Yep, we'll get you there.
Yeah, that's it for me. Anything else you had to speak on? Any more you wanted to bring up? Happy?
No, that's pretty much it. I'm really excited to implement some new concepts and get you prepping for the next meet. I think we're going to have a pretty good turnout.
Yeah, my goal, it's probably a bad idea to just throw out goals this far out, but I'm going to anyway, will be to hit that 400 squat, which I have been, it's not like it's an outrageous goal. I have hit a high 390 before. And the 385 at record breakers, which was actually quite comfortable. So I know that our strength's there. We just have to work on the fatigue management and coming to that comp fresh and build that back, and obviously get the 400 deadlift that I didn't at this one. If I can get that, no doubt in my mind the bench will be over 200, so that'll be 1,000 total ticked off as well. But the 400, the double whammy there will be the main goal into these next comps.
Do them in the same meet. That'll be some big boy stuff. Yeah,
well, at the moment it's only Dylan and Odell in Australian history in any weight class that have done it, and they're obviously gigantic monsters, absolute freaks. So to be put in even relatively the same basket as them would be fucking sick.
That would be monstrous.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, I'll end it there.